Good evening. This is David Cashman with SEB Housing. This is the information session for the affordable units at Michael's Landing in Lynnfield. Tonight we'll just be going through some of the salient points from the information packet to tell you a little bit about how to apply, how this program works, and what to expect going forward. I'm going to give it just another minute here to see if we have any other folks tune in, just in case anyone's joining a little bit late. In the meantime, just want to make sure everyone can hear me, so I'm just going to type the question. Again, this is the information session for Lynnfield Michael's Landing, and just going to wait another minute here to see if we have any other folks tune in. Okay, well, if anyone joins later, we can catch them back up. But this is the information session for the affordable units at Michael's Landing in Lynnfield. My name is David Cashman. I work with SEB Housing. We're the affordable housing lottery consultant who's been hired by the developer to help advertise this opportunity, work with applicants who are interested, and eventually hold a lottery. And one of the biggest ways that we'll interact with applicants is by collecting applications if people want to submit them, reviewing them, and then helping applicants through the application process and letting them know if they're eligible or if, unfortunately, they're not eligible for this opportunity. I'm going to go through some of the things that I think are the most important pieces of information to know about this process. Probably the most important thing is, if you're interested, submit an application by the deadline. The deadline is September 14th at 2 p.m. You have to submit a fully complete lottery application. If you do get an application in by the deadline and you're eligible, I would say there's a very good chance that you'll be able to move on to the next step in this process, which is to work with the leasing office and to apply for a lease. So just a couple distinctions here to kind of make apparent. One is we're not the leasing office. By we, I mean SEB Housing. We're not the leasing office, and we're not the ownership team. We're an off-site consultant that helps with the lottery and affordable housing administration for the 17 affordable units. We sort of work with applicants through what you can think of as step one in this process, which is to apply for the lottery, and we'll help you, and we'll make a determination whether or not you're eligible. And then for households who are eligible after the lottery, we will pass them off to the leasing office, and then they can engage in step two in the process, which is to work with the leasing office to see if they're eligible for a lease. Certainly, the leasing office can tell applicants in more detail and more firsthand experience about the units themselves, and any households moving forward after the lottery would be able to look at units and floor plans in person, I think, but certainly virtually, if not in person. I can tell you just a little bit about the information that I've been given. I know that this development kind of sits between Route 1 to the east and then Hawks Pond to the west, so it's sort of got a nice blend of being in nature, being near this sort of tranquil place, but then also to the east near Route 1. So if you need to get somewhere, obviously Route 1 is a thoroughfare that can take you to many places, but it is sort of pushed back from Route 1. I have driven by it, and so it's not right there. You will be set back from Route 1 by probably 100 yards or so. These are brand new apartments. It's a totally brand new development with very modern and high-end features. This process, there will be 17 units made available through this process out of a total of 68, I believe, in the development. These units have been already approved by Mass Housing, who's the program administrator for this project. So what that means is that they're interspersed throughout the development. They're not all kind of packed in one corner. They're not all stacked one on top of another. They fairly represent the units as a whole within the building. And someone walking through the corridors would not be able to look at a door and say, that's an affordable unit, that's a market rate unit, that's an affordable unit, etc. So from the exterior, they are indistinguishable, fairly laid out and proportional to the overall mix of units within the development. The affordable homes, I understand, have tall ceilings, oversized windows, kitchens have quartz countertops. They have wood plank flooring, in-home laundry in each apartment, and private patios and private storage as well. And there's also a number of amenities on site, which include fitness studio, a place where you can a work from home center, club space, and also there's parking on site. As far as the 17 affordable units, 2 of them are 1 bedroom, 1 bath. Those are in the sort of high 700 to low 800 square foot range. And the rent for those is $1,508 per month. Both of those units have features built out for persons with mobility impairments. So the way that'll work is that anyone who applies for a 1 bedroom unit will go on the 1 bedroom waiting list, and we'll talk about waiting lists later. Households who indicate a need for features for those with mobility impairments will get priority for those units, but everyone who applies for a 1 bedroom will be on that a waiting list, and the only 2 units will have those features. Conversely, there are 15 2-bedroom units being made available through this process. None of those are disabled accessible. Those have 2 beds, 2 baths, and they're about 1,100 plus square feet. And the rent on those is $1,785 per month. Now, keep in mind, those rents that I just quoted, $1,508 for a 1 bedroom and $1,785 for a 2 bedroom, those do not include utilities. So on top of rent, tenants will be expected to pay for their gas, heat, and electricity, which cooking and hot water are both electric. Also, the cost of water and sewer. 1 parking space is included in the rent, and pets are allowed. Just a little bit of a background on rents. Rents are not set according to any particular applicant's financial circumstances. Rents are set according to figures published by HUD every year, usually in April. And they are set so that a household making 80% of the area median income shouldn't be spending more than 30% of their gross income on rent. You don't need to know what that formula is or sort of get yourself bogged down in it. I think the import of that is just to sort of appreciate that rents are set according to a formula, and they are not set according to any particular applicant's income or assets. So depending, for some households, I'll talk about income limits in a sec, but those are based on the number of persons in the household, and so, how affordable this is to any particular household will depend maybe in part on how many people are applying for the unit and how close they are to the income limit for the household size. I can elaborate a little bit on that in a minute when I talk about income limits. The other import of that, and I'll talk a little bit about later, is that rents change every year when HUD publishes the area median incomes. Lynnfield is part of the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy area. It's a huge area, covers dozens and dozens of cities and towns in and around greater Boston. sort of rightly or wrongly so, but that is how the rents are set, and Lynnfield is in that area along with many other cities and towns. In terms of eligibility, what are the eligibility requirements? So I just alluded to one of the biggest ones is you have to be under the income limits and the asset limits. Also, not so much an eligibility requirement, but priority for the units is given based on household composition. One of the first questions that you'll be asked to fill out when you complete an application is your household type. And the only two types that you can fill out for this property is a household type 2 or a household type 1. Generally, household type 1 is a household who, according to the program rules, only needs 1 bedroom, and a household type 2 is a household that, according to program rules, needs 2 bedrooms. The import of this is that for 2-bedroom units, type 2 households, which are generally bigger households with more people in them, will get priority over type 1 households, which are typically smaller households. Additionally, as Mass Housing is the program administrator for this development, households with only 1 person in them can't live in a 2-bedroom unit unless they need an extra bedroom as a reasonable accommodation, typically for some sort of medical disability that's documented. That is the Mass Housing rule. So if you're a type 1 household, if you're a 1-person household, which would be a type 1 household, and you're interested in a 2-bedroom unit, please keep that in mind, that you would not be permitted to live in a 2-bedroom unit. And we'd let you know that when you apply, unless you meet that exception. Number 3, households cannot own a home when they go to sign a lease. So if you own a home now, that's okay. It doesn't have to be sold when you're applying. It doesn't have to necessarily be sold when you're in the lottery. It doesn't have to be sold right after the lottery. But if you do own a home, you would get and you're otherwise eligible, you get a conditional eligibility letter from us that says, hey, Mr. So-and-so, you're generally eligible, except you do have to sell this home before you're able to sign a lease. And that's something that we'd be following up on after the lottery. Finally, and this doesn't come up too often, but if someone has a financial interest in this, they're related to the developer, they work for the developer, or they're related or work for the management company. And that's something I do see that comes up from time to time, not often, but maybe a household works for the management company and they want to take advantage of this opportunity. For better or worse, that is not permitted. So let's talk about income. The income limits, those are ceilings that are set by the program. Those are set every year. Again, those are the ones that are published by HUD. That's the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy area. For a household size of 1, it's $67,400. For a household size of 2, it's $77,000. For a household size of 3, it's $86,650. And for a household size of 4, it's $96,250. You don't have to memorize those. They're littered throughout the information packet, application, ads. So it's all right there. But when I talked a moment ago about just how affordable an apartment might be, may depend in part on the household size. Well, just as an example, the 1-bedroom rent is the 1-bedroom rent, and that's $1,508 a month plus utilities. Now, if you're a household size of 1 applying for that 1-bedroom, you can only make $67,400. But a household size of 2 can make up to $77,000. So approximately $10,000 more. And if those households are bumping right up against those income limits, obviously that 1-bedroom is going to be a little bit more affordable to that household size of 2 than it is to the household size of 1. Same premise goes for the 2-bedroom units. There's no minimum income limit, no minimum income requirement for the program. So stated another way, a household that has absolutely no income would be eligible under the program. However, as it's the case that in this program, households have to be able to afford the rent on the strength of their own income and assets. And as the leasing office will be doing a screening when households apply for leases after the lottery, it wouldn't do anyone any good, neither the applicant, not SEB, nor the management team, to put households in the lottery who will never have, any realistic possibility of meeting the leasing office's lease screening criteria. That lease screening criteria states that households' rent to income ratio has to be approximately 2.5x. So in other words, a household has to make 2.5 times the rent in income. Now, you can also factor in assets. So a household that may not have a ton in income but has a lot in assets could still meet that requirement. So we're looking at income and assets, and also because it's not a program requirement, it's really just sort of this isn't in anyone's best interest to pass a household along who's never going to be able to actually afford the rent. If it's close, we're not looking at this as closely as we are the income limits. Those income limits, if you're a household size of 1 and the income limit is $67,400 and you make $68,400, as close as that is, we may unfortunately have to say it's close, but we got the limit is the limit, and unfortunately you're $1,000 over. But with the minimum income and asset determination, if you're close, we SEB will say that's close enough. You'll have to meet the leasing office's screening criteria after the lottery if you're moving forward. But we're certainly not looking to screen people out based on the minimum income threshold if it's close. What does that mean in terms of dollars and cents? Well, for a 1-bedroom unit, given the rent of $1,508 per month, using that 2.5x rent to income ratio, a household would need to demonstrate that they have an income and assets roughly $45,000 and change. And for a 2-bedroom unit with rent of $1,785 a month, that minimum income and asset threshold would be $53,550, roughly. Again, if it's close, SEB will say that's close enough for us. But that's just something to keep in mind. If you're a little bit under that, you will need to pass the leasing office's lease screening criteria after the lottery. Income determination. Income includes all members of the household, anyone who's going to be signing the lease or living in the unit. It's gross income, before it's not net income. The only exceptions are household members under the age of 18 and household members who are full-time students and who are dependents. We only count $480. Bit of a random number, but that's the number. So if a couple has a full-time student dependent who will be living in the unit, who also works, maybe they make $5,000 a year, we only count $480 of that, and the rest of it doesn't get counted. Income is defined pretty broadly by the program. That's not something that we SEB Housing make up. It is we're just carrying out what the program requires. So, the sources of income can be varied, especially in today's day of kind of the gig economy and people sometimes having multiple jobs, part-time jobs, a little bit of self-employment on the side, maybe selling stuff online. So your kind of 9-to-5 job, that's the one that people often think of, but there could be other ones too, and we list a lot of those in the application. But please don't feel frustrated if you sort of are curious why that is, or think that SEB is just trying to make your application difficult. I promise you, we're not. We want to see as many people get qualified as can be qualified, but we do have to implement the program, and the program defines income expansively. So, it can include things like child support or alimony or unemployment or Social Security income or SSDI, if you have a pension, if you're getting periodic payments from a family member, unemployment compensation, workman's compensation, interest income from assets that you hold. Those are all various sources of income. So again, not as simple as just your kind of standard 9 to 5. And the income projection is prospective. It's kind of what we reasonably can determine that you are likely to make over the next 12 months based on what you have been making recently. Obviously, your recent income is a very good predictor of what you are likely expected to make going forward. Also, we do have to look at assets. Like income, assets can be varied. They're defined broadly by the program. Kind of the most common ones are checking account, saving account, and we do need to see statements for those. The last couple of statements. Usually, you can just download those right off, the internet. Most banks, you can just do some online banking and get a statement. But there are various other types of assets as well. The thing about assets is there's no asset limit, so there's really no need to kind of worry about not disclosing stuff or worry that disclosing something is going to put you over some limit and make you ineligible. Really, the kind of biggest thing about assets is if you have an asset that generates income, well, then we have to add that income to the income limit that we just talked about. But other than that, there's no asset limit. And we're not counting personal property, by the way. So, we're not interested in your, stamp collection, the value of your stamp collection, or, cars or jewelry or stuff like that. We've listed in the application what the assets are that you would need to disclose. And then another big one is obviously if you own property, real estate, real property. As I said before, that is a program, hard and fast rule that you can't own a home in any fashion in trust as a sort of co-owner with someone else. Vacation home, rental property, you cannot own a home and be eligible for this program. So the home would have to be sold before you could sign a lease. Sometimes households wonder, do they have to be a resident of Lynnfield to apply? Absolutely not. You can, that is not a requirement, as I'll talk about a little bit later. Residents of Lynnfield may get a priority for some of the units, but being a resident is not a requirement. Okay, the second sort of big program eligibility, and this is maybe less of an eligibility and more of a, just a requirement that the program has in place, is that priority has to be given based on household size composition. And essentially what that means is, for households who are, according to the program, who need two bedrooms, that they get priority over smaller households who really only need one bedroom. So any households with 4 people or 3 people are, according to the program, type 2 households. They need 2 bedrooms. A 2-person household, but there are 2 heads of household, but there's a medical condition where they can't share a bedroom, they would need 2 bedrooms. And then like a 2-person household where there's a parent and child, that would be a type 2 household. Conversely, a type 1 household would include, like a couple or just one person. The application on one of the very first pages will ask you which household type you are. And when we talk about the waiting list, and as you can see in the information packet, for the 2-bedroom units, the household type is important because household type 2s will be above household type 1s, independent of where they're drawn in the lottery. If there are any households who are going through a divorce or separation, wondering about applying, you can apply. The divorce proceedings have to have been initiated at the time you apply. If it's something you're only contemplating or thinking about, or you're in mediation or something like that, then we would need to see the spouse's financial statements as well. But otherwise, if you have commenced the separation proceedings, then we don't need to see the spouse's financial documents. Whether or not the separation needs to be totally complete by the time you move into a unit may depend in part on the complexity of the separation, what's at stake. If it's a really kind of simple separation and there's no, big assets, there's not a home, there's not alimony or child support or things like that involved, it's possible that we could qualify you even if the divorce is not finalized at the time you go to sign a lease. If it is a more complex divorce with more at stake, chances are it would need to be finalized by the time that you went to sign a lease. So deadline to apply is September 14th. The lottery will be 9 days later on the 23rd. The night of the lottery, we will establish the waiting lists and send them to all the lottery households. Those waiting lists will be ordered top to bottom in the order of priority that households will get to move forward to step 2, which is to apply for a lease with the leasing office. And it's important to remember that being program eligible is different than being lease eligible. So when you're applying for the program, we're not asking you questions about your credit. We're not asking about it, if you have any criminal background, landlord references, anything like that. So it is important to keep that distinction in mind. If you are eligible for the program and you're in the lottery, that's a great first step, but it is not the final step. And it is quite possible and does happen that households are, program eligible. They get all this way, and then they've, got really miserable credit, and the leasing office says, "I'm sorry, you don't meet our lease screening criteria." So, if you are in the lottery and you do get a high waiting list position, don't give notice to your current landlord until you've applied for a lease and have a unit reserved, because that would be a very risky move. When you submit an application with us, and I really encourage you to do it early if you're interested, because we'll work with you, and it could take you 2, 3, 4, 5 tries before it's totally complete. It is really, really rare that households get a totally complete application on the first try, and that's not because we're trying to make it difficult or like this is some kind of test or something. It's just that there is a lot of documentation that's required, and additionally, sometimes households will, or oftentimes really households will submit documents that raise further questions, and so additional paperwork may need to be provided. So just as an example, household may fill out the application and they may provide, bank statements as required by the application. But then upon review, we see that there are all these deposits, frequent deposits, 100, 200, 100, 300, 250, and they're periodic. They're, once a week, twice a week. And we can't tie that to a job or anything else. Well, then we're going to need to ask questions about, where those deposits come from to make sure that, you haven't neglected to tell us about another income source that you have. And that becomes, obviously with different cash apps like Venmo and PayPal, a lot of people have money coming in and out of their account that's not tied to a job, and which does need additional documentation and explanation. So it's really important not to wait till the 11th hour to submit your application, because as I said, most households We'll have to go back at least once to maybe collect a few more documents because, we looked at something that raised additional questions or because they forgot to submit something. And if you're waiting till the, last day to do it, now you're going to be scrambling to get that stuff before the deadline, which you don't want to do. And we'll be very, when you do submit an application, we'll send you a checklist that, lists everything out, bulleted form. So hopefully it'll be very clear what's missing or what needs further clarification. And we're available to answer questions if anything isn't clear. But again, earlier is better. This is not a one bite at the apple type of situation. Get that application in so we can work with you if there's anything that's missing. If you are eligible, you will get a lottery application number. That will be in the form of A dot blank blank blank. So probably A.001, A.002, A.003, etc., etc. Those numbers are merely anonymous identifiers to be used in the lottery and to communicate with lottery applicants in a way that protects your personal information. They have no bearing on sort of you moving forward in terms of, in your priority in moving forward. So stated differently, A.001 is simply the first household who submitted a totally complete application to us and who was eligible. It doesn't mean this is the first person who's going to get to move forward in step 2. Make sure you have your lottery application number for the night of the lottery. If you haven't, if you've never been given one and you think you're in the lottery, you could be setting yourself up for disappointment. So make sure that you have been given one, because that is kind of your ticket to being in the lottery. On the night of the lottery, there will be 2 drawings. There is a local preference in this lottery for some of the units, not for all of them. And then there's a general drawing. So there'll be 2 drawings. The first one will be the local preference drawing. That will be for all households who live in Lynnfield, who work in Lynnfield or for Lynnfield, or who have someone in the household attends the Lynnfield schools. And there will be a local preference for 11 2-bedroom units, and that's it. The rest of the units are general units. There's no local preference attached, so that would apply to 4 2-bedroom units and the 2 1-bedroom units. So what does local preference mean exactly as far as kind of moving forward? It doesn't mean that for the 11 2-bedroom units where there's a local preference attached that only local preference households can get those units. That's not what it means. All it means is that as between similarly situated households, a household who has local preference would get priority versus the household who doesn't. So for the 2-bedroom apartments, that have local preference attached, type 2 households who have local preference would get priority over type 2 households who do not. But those type 2 households who do not have local preference would get priority over type 1 households who do. And those type 1 households who do have local preference would get priority over type 1 households who do not. So as you can see, your household type is more important than whether you live, work, or have kids in the Lynnfield schools. The type and need for 2 bedrooms trumps the local preference. But as between similarly situated households, the local preference priority would elevate one household on the list over another. But again, that's only for 11 2-bedroom units. There's no local preference after the lottery. And I think anyone who gets in this lottery, whether local preference or not, especially for the 2-bedroom units, there are 15 of those, is going to have a very, very good chance of getting a unit. Again, for the 1-bedroom units, those are both built out for persons with mobility impairments. So if someone does have a mobility impairment, they'll get preference for those. But otherwise, it'll just be determined by the lottery drawing. Now, for the lottery drawing, I'll pull all the application numbers out of a box. I'll do it twice. I'll do it for the local preference households, and then I'll do it for everyone. You're more than welcome to attend the lottery. The thing about it, and you don't have to attend it also if you don't want to, you'll find out the results at the same exact time as everyone who does. The thing about the lottery is you don't know exactly what it means when I'm drawing the numbers, because you don't know the households ahead of you. You don't know what unit type they even applied for. You don't know what household type they are. You don't know whether they have local preference or not. So yes, it is true that as a general matter, being picked earlier is better than being picked later. However, it doesn't tell you the whole story, because there's additional sorting and ranking that we have to do. And so, for example, if there's a type 1 household who applies for a 2-bedroom unit, and they're the very first household number selected in the lottery, they're still going to be jumped over by every type 2 household who applied for a 2-bedroom unit who's picked later. And that's because we have to implement those priorities. So perhaps a little bit anticlimactic if you do tune into the lottery. Again, it is generally better to be picked earlier rather than later. But it doesn't, as the lottery's happening, you can't instantaneously say, oh, there's a winner or there's a loser. You won't know exactly how it all kind of shakes out until later on that evening, when I'll send you the waiting list. Those will be ordered from top to bottom in the order that households will get to move forward to step 2, which is to apply for a lease. Another thing is, unlike most lotteries where we tend to think of winners or losers, and we pick only so many households and those are the winners, and everyone else is, thanks for playing, but too bad. That's not how this works. Every household who's eligible will have a spot on a waiting list. So again, every household who's in the lottery will have a spot on a waiting list for a unit size that they're eligible for. And now it may not be exactly the spot you want, but you will have a spot. The other thing is even if you don't have one of the very highest spots, the kind of conversion percentage of lottery eligible households who then go on to convert leases are not 100% for various reasons. Households may end up, for whatever reason, that they don't want to move from their current situation. They may not be eligible for a lease. Maybe they're in a different lottery for a different unit somewhere, and that's where they want to go. But typically, leasing offices have to screen about 3 households for every 1 unit that gets filled. And so the kind of import of that is, if you don't have one of the very top waiting list positions, that is not reason to despair and think, oh, I'll never get a unit. It may just be that you have to wait for the households ahead of you to be screened to see if a unit opens up, which it very well might, provided you're not too far down on the list. It is important to respond to the invitation that's given to you by the leasing office to move forward in step 2. If there are still units, if there aren't enough lottery households to fill all of the units, which is possible, they'll open it up to households who weren't in the lottery, who want to come in and reserve a unit. They'll be behind all the lottery households. So being in the lottery is a great advantage in that sense, and that you'll definitely be ahead of any household who wasn't in the lottery. But point is, if you'll be invited to move forward, and if you shrug it off or blow it off and don't respond to the leasing office, and then 3 weeks later decide, oh, actually, I am still interested in this, and now I'd like to apply, they may have dropped you already, and you may lose that benefit that you had as a lottery household. So you do want to kind of be available, be checking your phone and email after the lottery, and you'll have the leasing office contact and be trying to get in touch with them about moving forward. When you do move forward, you'll be able to select from any of the available units. I think all of the units are coming online roughly at the same time, but the first household, just by way of example, the household with the number one position on the 2-bedroom waiting list, they'll be able to select from any of the 15 2-bedroom units. So maybe they want one on, a particular floor or particular facing a certain way, and they'll have that option to select that unit. Now, once they reserve that unit's kind of off the market, and the next household will be able to select from the 14 that remain, the next household from the 13 that remain, and so on and so forth until all 15 2-bedroom units are filled. So you're not it's not like, there aren't units assigned to each waiting list position. Like you're the number one household on the waiting list, therefore you get this unit. No, you have some agency, you have some control, you'll have some choice, which is nice. And again, the units are interspersed, they're on different levels, different sides of the buildings, not immediately identifiable as affordable units. And so that's nice. You'll be, especially if one of the higher waiting list positions, you'll get your choice of the unit that best suits you. One other thing on that is you can only choose from the units that are on the waiting list that you're invited forward from. So if you have a really high, let's say 2-bedroom waiting list position, but not as high on the 1-bedroom list, if the leasing office invites you from the 2-bedroom list, you can't say, oh, great, well, actually, I want to reserve this 1-bedroom unit. You can only choose from the units that are available from the waiting list that you're being invited from. And you may be invited from different waiting lists at different times, depending on where you are on those waiting lists. So you may have to make a decision, if you're really high on the 2-bedroom list, but you're kind of hoping for a 1-bedroom, and you don't have as high of a position on the 1-bedroom waiting list, you may be in a position where you have to say, ooh, do I want to pass on the 2-bedroom in the hopes that I'll get invited from the 1-bedroom? Or do you say, well, one in the hand is worth two in the bush. I'm being invited from the 2-bedroom, and I'm going to take that. Too bad. I wish I was being invited from the 1-bedroom now, but I don't want to risk it. Again, that's a decision you may or may not confront yourself with or be confronted with. Generally speaking, if you're in the lottery, you've done your review with SEB, you're probably sick and tired of us by that point and should be done with us prior to move-in, unless you have a move-in date after March 23rd, 2021. I don't think that's likely to happen in this lottery because I think all the units will be ready before then. But if I'm wrong on that and they have units that are staggered in terms of their delivery times, and you end up choosing a unit and you're not going to move in until May of 2021, then unfortunately you will have to update your file with us, because by the time you will have moved in, your file will be stale. It'll be certainly easier than your initial file that you had to submit to get into the lottery. It'll be more of just an update, but that is something just to kind of keep in mind in terms of selecting units. If there is staggered delivery, just keep that in mind that you may have to update your file. Now, every year, if you do end up reserving and leasing a unit, you have to, if you want to stay in that unit in year 2 and year 3, then you have to be recertified each year, showing that you're still eligible for the program. That recertification is very similar to what you do to get into the lottery. So showing what your income and assets are, and providing documentation of those. That may be with the SEB. If we stay on, it may be with someone else. We don't know just yet. The good news is, having already done it and having a file already put together, doing the recertification should be easier, than the initial one that you would have done to get into the lottery. Additionally, the program allows for households to make quite a bit more in income and still qualify for the program when they're being recertified. So you can make up to 140% of 80% of the area median income and still be eligible. So what does that mean? Well, just to give you an example, if you're a household size of 1 and you're initially applying to get into the lottery, you can make up to $67,400. Anything more that you make too much. But fast forward a year, that same household size of 1, if they're now recertifying because they want to sign a lease for year 2, they can make up to $94,360. So almost $30,000 more, and they'd still be eligible for the program, which is a great benefit to households in this program. And obviously that means, hopefully, unless your boss is giving you a huge raise, maybe you could get a little raise or, change jobs, make a little more money, and still be eligible. And usually the recertification that you'll have to do, certainly with us, but probably with any agent who may be working with the property, it has to be done in advance of your lease expiring, because they want to know if you're going to be eligible and be able to sign a lease for year 2, and they need to know that in advance of that date, your end date of your lease coming up. So typically you'd have to get it done roughly 2 months before your lease end date, which means that you'd be given your recertification packet like 4 months before your end date, so that you can start working on it, get it done, and hopefully that'll be to your benefit too. So you'll know if you're still eligible and can kind of plan for that next year if you're going to stay in the unit or not. As I said, the 2 one-bedroom units are disabled accessible units, so any households who do have a mobility impairment will get priority for those. You do need to have documentation demonstrating that impairment by someone like a doctor or a medical professional who knows of that. So if that does apply to you, make sure to check it off on your application and submit the required documentation so that you do get the priority that you are entitled to. So again, that is kind of a rough outline of the biggest sort of things I think you need to know if you're interested in applying for this. It's obviously a great opportunity. The rents are significantly below what they are on the market, and it's a good location and a brand new beautiful building with great amenities and very nice apartments. Biggest thing that you can take away from this is, if you think you're eligible, get your application in. The deadline is September 14th, and like I said, we'll work with you along the way. So if you have questions, we can work with you and hopefully get you a totally complete application. Our phone number, fax, email is on the application. If you are watching this and you have a question, reach out to info@sebhousing.com, and we can respond to your question. And otherwise, we hope to see your application soon. Good luck and have a great evening. Thank you.